Hello and welcome back to All About Autism, Part 5. We welcome Ellie Kolatsi tonight and Sophia Christophi, and we have something special for you tonight. We have another member of the London Autism Group charity, James Gordon, who is a co-founder with Chris Papadopoulos. Unfortunately, Chris is at home with the flu, so get well soon, Chris. We're going to have to wing it tonight. So we launched the community cafe for the London Autism charity on last Saturday, at the Greek community, the Cypriot, the Greek Cypriot Community Centre in Earlham Grove, and it was a real hit. We were so proud. We want to say a few words of thanks to, first of all, the people at the Greek Community Centre, Christalla, Louis, Susie, who run the Greek Community Centre. Greek Cypriot Community Centre. There I go again. I'd like to thank the Vrisagi for their kind donation of dinner for two for the raffle. We'd like to thank also Wilton Patisserie for their kind donation of all the goodies they sent us to eat. And also we'd like to thank the Barigiagi who were present, Michael Yakumi. We'd also like to thank Hellenic TV who were there and filming us. That's going to be shown. When's that going to be shown? Is that the 12th of November? Yeah, 12th of November. At 7 p.m. on Hellenic TV. So we look forward to seeing that. And they filmed the whole thing, really. We'd also like to say thanks to Bambos Haralambos, who came to cut the ribbon, the MP for Enfield Southgate, and also to Catherine West, who's the MP for Wood Green and Haringey. And it was really nice to meet her as well. And she came and saw everything through, and she was really happy to be there. We would also like to thank everybody who turned up. It was really nice to meet everybody and their children. And we just had a really nice time. We had a really, really lovely time. We met a lot of nice people, a lot of interesting people, and it was just nice to have this community thing, wasn't it?
Great. It was really good. Yeah.
Would anyone like to say, have I left anything out?
Just to say that we're still hosting at the end of the month. Yeah, it's last Saturday of the month.
Last Saturday of every month.
That's right. The last Saturday of every month at the Cypriot Community Centre. I got it right this time. At 10:30?
11 till 1.
Oh, 11 till 1. Okay, we had an early one this time. So 11 till 1 every last Saturday of the month, apart from December, because it falls on New Year's Eve, doesn't it? So we'll expect to see more people next time. We had lots and lots of people turn up. It was just really, really nice. So
welcome, James. It's nice to have you here.
Thanks.
Could you tell us, today the topic is Autistic Identity, and could you tell us a little bit about neurodiversity and what it is?
Yeah, neurodiversity is really, really important when you're thinking about autistic identity, and it was thought up by someone writing their PhD in New Zealand called Judy Singer, and she was trying to come up with a term to encompass all the diverse collection of co-occurring conditions that often exist alongside autism, and so she invented one on the spot. So things like ADHD, dyslexia, dyspraxia, and PDA, and many other things are often connected with autism. And so when we think about neurodiversity, we can think about it as that there's a different way that everybody thinks, and the majority of people, autistic people, have called neurotypical, so that's like most people, but then there are other people with other types of brain, and we call those neurotypes. Mm-hmm. And autistic people are one of those neurotypes. So neurodiversity is about thinking about autism in a different way, in a more positive way, and a less derogatory way. Thinking of autistic people as being different and not less, as we say.
Yep. So let me just get this correct. So neurodiversity encompasses ADHD, dyslexia, and autism.
Yeah,
And-
among other things, yeah.
among other things. And neurotypical is not the opposite.
Well, it's just separating out into groups the different ways people think, the
Yeah.
different types of brain people have, differently wired.
Differently what? Yeah. Did you want to say anything, Sophia?
I think the concept of neurodiversity is also to remember that there is no right way for
Yeah.
a brain to work. So just because an autistic person's brain works slightly differently to somebody who's not autistic, there isn't one that's necessarily better or worse. They are just different ways of thinking.
I think that's an important point, isn't it? We're all different anyway, aren't we? Thank you. So, could we say a bit more about the Autistic Pride?
Yeah. So, just to kind of add on to the end of,
Okay.
of that, what Sophia was saying. So it's also about neurodiversity is also about breaking down the stereotypes that have been created. So often people, neurotypical people, like most of society, will think of autism as it's portrayed in the media, and for a long time the only autistic people to be in the media were geniuses and people like that that become famous through that, but that they only represent 10% of all autistic people. So it's very important not to think of all autistic people like that, because as is in the name, it's about diversity, and it's about valuing everybody, no matter what their abilities are.
Exactly.
It can be people that are non-speaking and things like that, but everyone is able to contribute in some way to society and of equal value.
So you're basically saying that it's not the typical way that we see on the media that autism is portrayed. So what we see is like Rain Man, for instance, those kind of movie type stereotypes. We want to move away from that.
There's a great movie that's been made about a non-speaking boy in Japan. It's called The Reason I Jump.
Oh yeah.
So films are being made now that are more realistic.
Sure.
Yeah, I think also trying to get sort of greater representation as well. So typically in the media you might see just autistic boys, but there's now more autistic female characters. And I think it's just trying to get across that although autistic people share similar characteristics, no two autistic people are the same.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's all about diversity, and so it's only in the last, say, 10 years that they've really changed how autism is diagnosed. Before that, it was thought of as only a male thing, so it was thought of as, they call it the male brain, and that kind of thing, but that's been disproved, and a lot of women now are being diagnosed, unfortunately, a lot later in life than the boys were for the last couple of decades.
That's good.
But at least it's catching up now, and a lot of material research and academic work is being done to help support women as well.
Yeah, that's great. More awareness as well, creating and different types of research done by autistic people, which is really important to say.
Which we've got a list of on our website on LondonAutismGroupCharity.org. We're sort of very keen to promote the right kind of information with the right kind of sources from the autistic advocacy community.
Okay, great. So, James, I just wanted to think a little bit more about Autistic Pride.
Yeah, so the key to autistic identity is Autistic Pride, and it's about giving the next generation strong role models and giving them some hope, and making a generational progress through the generations, so that we can advocate for ourselves and improve our situation in society. We started off by autistic people having large gatherings together, because this was before the internet and things like that.
Okay.
So I think they were inspired by things like Speaker's Corner at Hyde Park, and there's been events at places like Hyde Park, and now there are autistic organisations like Autistic Inclusive Meets, and they have Autistic Pride events. There are other ones up and down the country as well on certain days of the year, but it's also something we think about a lot in the autistic community every day of our lives.
Of course. I think that's important, and it's not just, as we say, one day or 1 week or a month. It's every day, all the time. That it's important to say that we create an awareness and a positive kind of scope around autism.
Yeah. I think it's important for people to be able to get that diagnosis early too, so that they grow up knowing that they're autistic, and they can sort of foster that sense of pride within themselves. So I remember pre-diagnosis and then after diagnosis, and I think when I got my diagnosis I didn't necessarily feel any sense of pride in it. It felt quite medical. This is what you have. But over the years where I've met other autistic people and learned more about autism, and I've come to understand myself better, I now see that as an integral part of me. There is no separating me and autism. I am autistic.
Sure. And just to add to that, when my son was diagnosed, I told him straight away. It wasn't something that I held back. I wanted him to know that that was part of him, and to create a positive environment for him. We're both learning, we're both on the journey together, and I think we got books together, and it was important to find information, the correct information, and talk to autistic people too. I think for me that was really important, to create that positivity around him, and he knows he's autistic, and that's good for him.
Absolutely. I think hats off to you there. That's amazing, and I think he'll benefit from it. I think it definitely, his mental health will benefit from that. I mean, so often, when a diagnosis is given, it's often in a very clinical way, and most of the time, parents are sort of sent out of there with no information really, and that's something that in the charity that we want to correct and create a place where people can come and hear the right information.
I completely agree with that. The first port of call was Google for me, and that's what you do naturally to find out information, but it's not always the correct information. So this is why the London Autism Group charities and the community cafes are so important, because you are connecting with autistic people, talking to autistic people, and having the right information, not the medical model.
Absolutely. There's so much misinformation on the internet that it's very important to go to the right places. For instance, there are companies that will prey on families, unfortunately, and take advantage of them, things like that, and portray it in a very medical way, as if it's a disease even, and as if children can be treated and cured, which they can't, But that's the whole thing about Autistic Pride and Neurodiversity, and what we call a social model of disability, where we think of it as the problem is not the person, but the problem is that society is not set up to support the person in the right way. And at London Autism Group charity, we are planning long term to provide that support gradually.
Sure. autistic people often experience quite a lot of discrimination. Sophia, can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, so we have a term in the autistic community and other disabled communities where we talk about ableism, and that means discrimination in favour of sort of able-bodied people or the majority of society. And what that can look like is sometimes disabled people hear things like you don't look disabled, or they might be judged for using the disabled toilets if they have an invisible disability, or they may encounter people that think they understand how the condition affects them without really being listened to. And I think a lot of exposure to this, some autistic people start to internalise these stereotypes and misconceptions, and can make you feel like your disability has made you sort of inferior, and that can be really damaging to mental health and self-esteem, especially if you're constantly being compared to non-autistic people or to the majority of society. We sometimes say it's a bit like hammering a square peg into a round hole.
Absolutely, thank you for that. And my son, definitely, but he doesn't look autistic quite a few times, especially when he's having a meltdown, and they just put it down to bad parenting or being naughty, inverted commas. So, did you want to add anything to that, James?
Absolutely. We've all experienced that kind of thing. I think there needs to be a rethink about educating people when they're very young, I think, and having classes on all these topics that we're talking about, and maybe not just educating autistic people about their own identities, but also including the majority of society in that conversation, and if that happened, there'd be a big change in attitudes. I think when people get older, there'd be a lot more autism acceptance, less discrimination, and that would be a lot better for autistic people. There'd be less stress on people. There'd be less bullying in schools. A lot of autistic children, there's very big number that are excluded from schools now, or parents have to take them out because of things like bullying, not just from children, but also that teachers don't understand. They're not trained properly about autism. There's sort of not input at the moment by autistic people into the training that teachers have.
Yep.
So there's all this kind of different dynamics going on, and we have a lot of different goals in the charity, and it's going to take many years, but I think we have to start somewhere, and we have to name all these things and start making some progress on changing things.
I completely agree, especially when it starts with schools and education and teacher training, getting the right training from autistic people.
Yeah, I think ultimately if society was more inclusive, some of the barriers that autistic people experience would be greatly reduced.
Yeah, absolutely. The more we talk about it, the more accepted, right?
Yeah, I think autism awareness is really important, but eventually we'd like to reach a stage of sort of autism acceptance too.
Yeah, exactly.
There's so many different areas where people talk about inclusion in schools and things like that, but it's not really what I would call true inclusion. It doesn't address a lot of the discrimination that autistic people face on a daily basis. It can be, a lot of autistic people are not in employment, for instance, and that's not through their own fault. It's and it's not because they haven't got the skills. It's just a question that it's technically in the law that employers have to make reasonable adjustments. That's how it's phrased for people with disabilities. The problem with that is autistic people face a dilemma when they're going for a job interview. If they disclose to the employer that they have a disability and that they're autistic, often the employers are not trained to deal with it. They haven't got time, they're under pressure themselves to get someone to fill this role, and they may, quite often pass over someone and just refuse them outright, or they'll refuse the adjustments. So that may require, so an example adjustment might be maybe not going to a job interview, having a written test instead, or something like that. Or if they do go to the job interview, then not being judged on things like eye contact and things like that, which is very difficult for autistic people.
Absolutely. James, just following on from what you were saying, I just wanted to think a little bit more about the employment and the discrimination stuff. So, Sophia, can you tell us a bit about your experience of that?
So with my experience, I almost didn't go into my chosen field of psychology because of how my diagnostic appointment went. So when they told me that I'm autistic and I expressed an interest in studying psychology, they didn't feel that would be suitable for me. They had lots of stereotypes about how my brain worked and that I might not be compatible with studying something like psychology. So I almost didn't pursue what I wanted to pursue based on how that appointment went. But I was lucky that those around me knew that it was a keen interest of mine and encouraged me to go for it regardless, which I think just highlights that actually sometimes even professionals hold a lot of stereotypes and misconceptions, and they can also direct how you then feel about your diagnosis, because it wasn't presented to me as being something good. It wasn't presented to me as, now you understand why you feel the way you do. It was more of a case of, in my experience, that here's your diagnosis and this means that you're going to find this difficult, this difficulty, and this is going to be a problem, and this is going to be a problem. So I'd like to hope that in the future, when younger people are being diagnosed, that experience is also more positive, and maybe that's another area that autistic adults can go into to sort of guide professionals on how to present that information to newly diagnosed autistic people, and where's the best place to get information after that. Because as we said earlier, when you Google autism, it's a lot of sort of what's wrong, very sort of deficit based, but actually there's lots of autistic adults out there who have many resources that they've written themselves or YouTube videos, and I always try to encourage people to seek out the material that's written by those that have got the lived experience if you want a sort of a broader view and a better understanding of what being autistic is like from all different angles. Thank you. And James, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, so that was very important, what Sophia said. Just like to add that because the official figures of the autistic population haven't really changed over the last at least 10 years, I think they're quite inaccurate now, because a lot more people are being diagnosed. A lot more women are being diagnosed, for instance. And I think one of the reasons for that is this discrimination that exists in society encourages autistic people maybe not to disclose whether they've had a diagnosis or not. So maybe to their employers, for instance, because they're afraid of the consequences of what the reaction will be, whether they'll continue to have employment. So that in turn leads to them pretending that they're not autistic, so they mask their autism. That's what we call it, and that means that they get no support. They're they're trying to, continue as normal when they need support. They need things. Just a few minor adjustments can make all the difference in an employment setting. And our charity does some training for employers to help them to support autistic people. The autistic person's mental health will suffer because of it. It can lead to them missing a lot of time of work when, for instance, having a short break time or something like that would be, would add to their productivity massively. Just having that kind of freedom to say, I'm feeling overwhelmed now, I need a break. An extra break, that would be fantastic. But also maybe having their supervisor be trained in ways to structure their day and maybe limit the amount of surprises and things like that, so that they can better cope, with the work environment. Otherwise, we come back to the main subject of identity again, and what Sophia was mentioning with internalised ableism, where somebody doesn't feel valued enough to speak up for themselves. So, our charity is there if people want to contact us. We often get emails every day on lots of different topics. One of them is this, if they need an advocate, we can commission advocates. There are autistic advocates that are experts on everything. We have a big network of contacts.
That's great. I think we're going to have to come back to this subject because it's really big and we haven't covered everything on tonight's show. So
I just wanted to say that with regards to what James said about the figures, we've discussed the figures before in the 1 in 21 from the Northern Ireland figures that are published every year against the National Autistic Society publishing every 7 years. So they are the most up to date, and it's 1 in 21 people are autistic now. The same number as people with green eyes, right? And it's very interesting that I was reading a book the other day. I picked up an old Reader's Digest thick book on nutrition, and there was a part that treated autism, inverted commas. And then it said the incidence of, I think it was something written in the 80s, it said the incidence of autism is actually 1 in 2,500. So that's basically what they were publishing in the 80s. So it's really, really interesting how things have moved on. We're really happy that you're all listening. We do this show in English because we want to appeal to the wider community. It's not just the Greek community who are listening. We did have a few non-Greeks at the launch of the cafe, and also our attendees at the other one, the London Autism Group charity cafe on the. Is it every first Sunday?
Second Sunday.
Second Sunday of the month at St.
Southgate.
What's the name of the church?
St Andrews.
St Andrews.
Are we sure about that one?
Yeah.
Okay. So we want to thank everybody who's listening. So we do the show in English for that reason. We can speak Greek. We are Greek speakers, the four of us. But we, the other day I was stopped on the stairs by Yanis Ioannou, who does the breakfast show, and he said, "Mori, γιατί δεν κάνετε το show στα ελληνικά?" And there's the answer. So we're happy to do it in Greek, but it will take us probably 10 times as long. So I just want to thank James tonight for making an appearance and talking on the show. He had a lot of interesting points there. Thanks again to Sophia Christophi and Ellie Kolatsi, who played radio presenter tonight. And we wish you a pleasant evening.
See you soon.